We had come up with something that was really disturbing. It's an attempt to turn embryos into jewelry. And I'm just going to play the clip here and let you see it for yourself.
As a fertility and IVF specialist, when we do IVF cycles, there are extra embryos often left over. Some of these are genetically non-viable and can never be a pregnancy, and others are viable.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there because right out of the gate he says something that is just factually wrong. He says some of these embryos are genetically defective and can never be a pregnancy. That's a crock of bull, quite frankly. Every embryo that is conceived, even one that might have genetic defects, is still a human being. A damaged human is not a non-human. He presents no argument for his belief that these are not real human beings. He simply asserts they're not even a viable pregnancy. Well, viability is another thing he doesn't argue for. How does it follow that because you depend on someone, you can be killed? He makes no argument for that. He simply, with a real quick rhetorical sleight of hand, tries to make it sound like these embryos are just genetic wastage and there's nothing more to them. So right away, we're getting some really shady argument here. Let's go on.
And couples are really conflicted what to do with them. There are 4 options. 1, you can use them. 2, they can be thawed out. They come to room temperature and they'll degenerate and be discarded. Number 3, they can be donated to another couple anonymously or known. 4, they can be donated for research. Embryos are not people.
Okay, embryos are not people. Why not? He makes no argument for why they don't count as one of us. He simply asserts it. Now, I was hoping in the clip he would actually lay out his reasons for why they're not human. Let's see if he does it or just goes on to the next point.
They're very special. They're not just a clump of cells. They are the potential to become a human life.
Okay, if you didn't catch that, he says, okay, they're not just clumps of cells. Okay, I'll agree with him on that, but he says they're merely potential life. What does that mean? A potential X must be an actual Y. So what are these embryos exactly? I mean, you can't just say potential. And basically what people mean when they say this is, well, we can draw this distinction between human being and human persons, and it's only persons that have the actual or immediate capacity for things like self-awareness, self-consciousness, the ability to value their own existence, their ability to solve cognitive problems, and whatever else they throw out. But they make no argument for why those things are value-giving in the first place. They just assert it, and that's what he's doing here. He makes no argument for why these things matter. Let's keep going.
And IVF specialists and embryologists treat them as such. We do have some couples that want to even bury them, and they do have that option. But turning them into jewelry, I'm really conflicted on what to think about that.
Well, let me ask a question here. Okay, I'm glad he's conflicted about turning embryos into jewelry. That ought to be disturbing, but why? Why are you conflicted? Why are you bothered by that? If embryos are just potential humans and not actual ones, it's only actual humans or persons that have rights, not mere potential ones. If he believes they're mere potential humans, why not use them for medical research or turn them into jewelry or use them for whatever you want, fishing bait if that were possible? It does not matter. The only reason why you should be bothered by this is if somewhere you know in your heart of hearts that this is not a way to treat human beings. Now, you might be thinking, what has gone wrong in our culture that would lead to people so callously treating their own offspring as an ornament they wear around their neck rather than a baby that they nurture in love and help grow? I think there's an answer to it. We're seeing a shift in the culture that is profoundly disturbing. And I'm going to talk for just a few minutes in the time we have left about what this is. Author Carl Trueman has made the observation that what's happening in our culture today is the desecration of man. And here's what he means. The biblical view of human beings is that we have specific natures. And because we have specific natures, meaning we are image bearers made in the image of God, there are intrinsic purposes that go with being a human being. Human beings have intrinsic purposes they ought to fulfill, or if you will, obligations we ought to live up to in virtue of our humanity. What's happening in our culture today is the nature, or the idea of human nature is not only being attacked at the ideological level, it is being desecrated, meaning an intentional attempt to destroy it, to devalue the idea that humans have value. And here's why. If you're living in a culture where people believe they have an unfettered right to define and construct themselves in terms of their identity, that means if they want to identify as a horse, they're a horse. If they're a man who says, I'm a woman trapped in a man's body, we're told we're obliged to accept that and not challenge it. If your identity is wrapped up in your feelings about what you want to be, and the idea of human nature counters that and says, guess what? You're a human being, and that means you have certain intrinsic purposes you ought to fulfill, and you have obligations that go with being a human being. If somebody puts forward the idea that humans have obligations they should fulfill as part of their nature as being humans, that's going to conflict right directly with people who think they are free to manipulate themselves and define themselves any way they want because there's no such thing as a fixed human nature. And what Trueman is getting at here is our technology today, think no further than your smartphone, has led us to believe that we are godlike in our ability to construct reality as we want to see it, including construct what it means to be human and including constructing our own identities. And so when someone comes along and says, wait a minute, human beings from the earliest stages of development have intrinsic value and they shouldn't be intentionally killed, discarded, or used for research, people come along and say, now, wait a minute. It's up to me to define where my value and identity comes from. Who are you to say there's a fixed idea of what it means to be human? That offends me. It makes me angry, and I'm not going to tolerate it. So what we're seeing, says Trueman, is not just an attempt to oppose pro-life arguments, but an attempt to desecrate the very idea of humans having intrinsic value in virtue of the kind of thing they are, their natures. And this is an attack not only on the pro-life movement, it's an attack on biblical theism, which teaches very clearly that human beings are not valued because of some function they can perform. Rather, they have value because of whose image they bear. Well, that concept of the Imago Dei is highly offensive to people in today's culture who want to believe that they have an unfettered will to power to define themselves as they wish with no limits and nobody else saying that they don't have the right to do that. So the anger is ratcheting up to the point where some people will say, I don't give a rip at all about human life. I'll just turn it into jewelry that I wear. And we're surprised that people start treating children as commodities. And this is something our Christian churches need to start talking about, not just in an obscure Sunday school classes, but from the pulpit. What have certain technologies done to our ability to see human beings, children in particular, as gifts we receive rather than commodities that we construct for parental fulfillment? And one of the problems with a lot of the assisted reproductive technologies that are out there, which, by the way, I understand are designed with a good purpose in mind, to help couples struggling with infertility have children of their own. There's nothing ungodly about wanting to have a child of your own. I would argue that's a God-given desire, but not at any cost. And it doesn't mean that all means of allowing someone to have a child are ethical or biblical. Rather, we have to look at what does this particular technology do to the individual human beings involved. For example, any assisted reproductive technology that would destroy embryos would be out of bounds for the Christian. And I would also say we got to go a step further and ask this. What do these technologies teach us about human beings? Are they driving us toward a mindset that says children are commodities that we use to make parents happy and feel good about themselves? Or does this technology honor the intrinsic dignity of the child and teach us to receive him or her as a gift rather than a commodity we manipulate for parents' well-being? These are things we got to think about, and I do commend to you Carl Trueman's book, The Desecration of Man. I think it will give you some great insights as to why people can think they can treat children as necklaces.